What if I told you that the story of a hero seeking immortality was written 1,500 years before Homer? That this hero survived a great flood, and his story appeared in records 1,000 years before the Bible? What if we knew his name, his fears, and his losses just as well as we know the names of our own ancestors? His name was Gilgamesh, and this is the oldest story ever told by humanity. The king whom the gods feared. Roughly 4,700 years ago, in the very heart of Mesopotamia, where modern-day Iraq stands today, there stood a city. It was called Uruk. By the standards of its time, it was a true metropolis. Towering brick walls, temples, bustling marketplaces, and tens of thousands of people living under one roof. Uruk was living proof that human civilization could do more than just survive. It could build something magnificent. Over this city ruled a king named Gilgamesh. According to legend, he was 2/3 god and 1/3 man. His mother was the goddess Ninsun, and his father was a mortal priest. This made him stronger than any warrior, wiser than any advisor, and more beautiful than any man to ever walk the earth. Gilgamesh was what we would call a superhuman today, but it was this very strength that became his first curse. Because absolute power breeds tyranny. Gilgamesh was not a kind king. He tore young men away from their families to serve him. He took brides for himself on the night of their weddings. He lived as though the entire world belonged solely to him. And the people of Uruk, tormented by their own ruler, cried out to the gods, "Please send us someone who can stop him." A man of clay and the wild. The gods listened, and they created Enkidu. Enkidu was a creature fashioned from clay, wild, untamed, and covered in hair. He lived among the animals in the wild, drinking water from puddles alongside gazelles, knowing nothing of city walls, laws, or fire. Hunters fled from him in terror. They told the king about this monster, and Gilgamesh sent a priestess named Shamhat to him, the one destined to introduce the wild man to the human world. Shamhat spent 7 days with Enkidu, and when he tried to return to the animals, they recoiled from him. He was no longer part of nature, he had become human. She then led him to Uruk. The meeting of Gilgamesh and Enkidu became one of the most unforgettable moments in the history of world literature. They clashed in battle right in the city streets, two titans equal in strength. They fought so fiercely that the walls shook, and when both finally stopped, exhausted and bloodied, something unexpected happened. They laughed, they embraced, they became brothers. The friendship born that day changed Gilgamesh. For the first time in his life, the king had an equal, someone he could not conquer by force, someone he did not want to conquer, the cedar forest and the wrath of the gods. Together, they embarked on a campaign that was meant to immortalize their names forever. Somewhere far to the west, in Lebanon according to some versions, or in a place inaccessible to mortals according to others, grew the cedar forest. It was a sacred forest, guarded by a monster named Humbaba. With a single roar, Humbaba could bring down mountains. His breath was fire, and his words were flame. The gods had placed him there as a guardian so that no human would ever dare to enter. Gilgamesh and Enkidu entered. The journey was long and grueling. At night, Gilgamesh was plagued by terrifying nightmares. Mountains collapsed on him, and the sky split open. But every morning, Enkidu explained to him, "This is a good sign. This is a prophecy of victory." They pushed onward. When they finally faced Humbaba, the monster was massive and terrifying. But he was not merely evil. He begged for his life. He offered gifts. He promised to serve Gilgamesh forever. And Gilgamesh almost agreed. Almost. Enkidu stopped him. He said, "If you spare him, the gods will never forgive us for coming here. Finish him now." And Gilgamesh listened. Humbaba was slain. The cedars were cut down. The heroes returned to Uruk in triumph. But behind this victory ran an invisible countdown. The gods do not forget. And soon they would have to pay.
The death that changed everything. The goddess Ishtar, struck by the beauty of Gilgamesh, offered herself to him as a wife. This was an incredible gift, the love of the goddess of love herself. But Gilgamesh rejected her, harshly, publicly. He listed all her former lovers and how each of them had perished or been destroyed. He called her fickle and cruel. Ishtar flew into a rage. She ascended to her father, the god Anu, and demanded revenge. She begged him for the bull of heaven, a creature of such immense power that every time it struck the earth, an abyss opened up, swallowing hundreds of warriors. And she unleashed it upon Uruk. Gilgamesh and Enkidu killed the bull of heaven as well. The gods gathered in council. Someone had to die for all of this, for Humbaba, for the bull of heaven, for the insult to Ishtar. They chose Enkidu. What happened next is the most profoundly human part of the entire epic. Enkidu fell ill, not from a wound, not in battle. He simply took to his bed and began to fade day after day. For 12 days, Gilgamesh sat by his side, never leaving his part. He held his hand. He spoke to him. He, the king, wept. And when Enkidu died, Gilgamesh could not believe what his eyes were seeing. He refused to accept what had happened. For 3 days he refused to let the body be buried, waiting for his friend to open his eyes. Only when a maggot appeared on Enkidu's face did Gilgamesh finally let him go. And at that exact moment, something broke inside him forever. It wasn't just grief. Grief he could have survived. The very foundation of his worldview shattered, because he realized if Enkidu died, he would die too. Gilgamesh, the demigod, the invincible warrior, the king of a great city, was mortal. And for the first time in his life, he felt true terror. Gilgamesh abandoned everything and set out in search of immortality, not for glory, but for one thing only. He did not want to die the way Enkidu died. Somewhere at the edge of the world lived Utnapishtim, the only mortal to whom the gods had granted eternal life. Gilgamesh passed through Mount Mashu in pitch-black darkness. He crossed the waters of death, and he found him. Utnapishtim told him the truth. Immortality is not a gift. It is a curse. He had survived the Great Flood. His story appeared in records long before Noah's Ark, and the gods had rewarded him with eternal life. But it meant only one thing: watching everyone around you pass away forever, being eternally alone. He gave Gilgamesh a chance. Stay awake for 7 nights, and immortality is yours. Gilgamesh fell asleep on the very first night. Then Utnapishtim revealed a secret to him. At the bottom of the sea grows a flower that restores youth. Gilgamesh dove down. He found it. He held it in his hands. But on his way back, he stopped to bathe. And while he was in the water, a snake slithered out and swallowed the flower. That is why snakes shed their skin and live on, while humans do not. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk empty-handed. But looking at the walls of his city, he saw them differently for the very first time. He had built them himself. He had protected them himself. He ordered his entire story to be carved onto 12 clay tablets and buried within the walls, so that they would remember. He turned out to be right. Nearly 5,000 years have passed. The civilization of Sumer has long since vanished. Uruk has turned into a hill of sand in the Iraqi desert. But the tablets were found. Scholars deciphered the cuneiform script. And the story of Gilgamesh echoed once more, in hundreds of languages and thousands of books, in this very documentary. He did not achieve immortality, and yet he became immortal. Perhaps that is the answer to the question he asked himself his entire life. Immortality is not a life without end. It is the story they remember after your death. What story will you leave behind?